is gone. This time I locked my door and realized when it become. You stay with me, but you don't want to end up like this. You stay with me, but you will never end up like this.
So first of all, good morning to everybody. Thanks, Rob, for the introduction. I must say that this is, I think, one of the first presentations I have in a ballroom, and I'm quite impressed by all this. But I hope that you are satisfied when I'm talking, because if I would dance, or if I would have to dance, would be a catastrophe, I can tell you. And then I've also understood that we have competition in-house. We have the structural funds. Our colleagues in the same venue also discussing their evaluation and monitoring. So I've just said to Rob, we have to entertain you well in order that you do not jump over to the colleagues and that we are still with you tomorrow here. So we will do some efforts in order to have some animation and some discussion here. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to describe to you the framework in which the rural development policy is operating after 2013. And an important part of this framework is the common strategic approach which the rural development policy shares with the other CSF funds, as we call them. And this is the Cohesion Fund, the Regional Development Fund, the Social Fund, and the Fisheries Fund. So we are, let's say, together in a boat, and we will have to organize our policies in a more coherent way in the coming period. Now, I think it is important that we look into the conditions in which and into the setting for this common strategic approach we have now, because I think it will have a big influence on the way how you organize the program, how the program will be organized by member states, but also, let's say, for monitoring and evaluation of results and outcomes. And however, let's say more on the operational part, on what influence that will have on concretely on the programs. You will see that tomorrow, I think. So today we are dealing with the overall framework. And this overall framework, in which all the so-called CSF funds are acting, is defined in a common provision regulation, where we have laid down the rules we all share. And the overall idea why we do this is the idea that we all would like to focus on EU 2020, on this strategy, and that we all think that we have to deliver to this policy objectives. And the other point is that we have an interest to simplify rules and the application of the policy, but not only, let's say, for the administration, also for them, if possible, for ourselves, but also for the individual beneficiaries. And I think we should be very serious on this, because they finally have the right, I think, to get more easily access and better use of the funds. Now, this general provision regulation also identifies certain common principles we have. Partnership is important. The question how the partners are involved in the process. There are certain rules on equality, non-discrimination. There's also a point on sustainable development, and this concerns something you are interested in afterwards, because we will have to do a certain climate change tracking. But this is a method which is still to be developed, also by the Commission, and to be put in a delegated act. And then, of course, the Common Provision Regulation explains this reinforced strategic approach for programming, which we all share. And here we have a number of common elements for all the funds. And let's say our common denominator are 11 thematic objectives. You can see them as objectives, but they are also a sort of priorities for all the funds, and they directly derive from the EU 2020 strategy. And then afterwards they are translated thematic objectives. Another element is the common strategic framework and the partnership contract. The common strategic framework should give guidance to member states when they set up their programs. How this will be done, we see that later on. In any case, the common strategic framework is at the stage of being adopted in the Commission, and we are waiting for the document to be approved in the coming days, but we will already today have a look into what the document will provide and give a flavor of what it means for the Rural Development Fund. The partnership contract, look into that a bit later on, and then we have also elements in the common provision rules which should reinforce the effectiveness of the programs and of the policy. And this is the ex-ante conditionality, as you know, which fixes certain or identifies certain conditions which have to be fulfilled in order that the programs can start to be implemented. We have macroeconomic conditionality, and we have a performance framework which should be an incentive to member states, which should reward good execution of the program and progress in the program by an additional amount of money, 5% of the overall amount per fund and per member state is held back, and is attributed to, let's say, the successful priorities or programs on EU level in 2019. Now we have, apart from that, also a number of elements which are seeking for better coordination. For example, as you know, we have developed a community-led local development approach and framework. Oops, no, sorry. A community-led local development framework, which is very clearly based, or let's say more or less copying of what we have at present under LEADER. It is now an approach, a local development approach, which is available for all the funds according to this pattern. And what we want to do with that, I think you are aware of it, we want to allow an integrated action, or local action. So the possibility for several funds, or for all of these funds, to act within a local development strategy. This should open up local development for the use of different funds and for, let's say, the best allocation of funds possible from the different policy areas. We have also, I hope, facilitated a bit the life of beneficiaries and of authorities by introducing common rules on eligibility. So we have harmonized approaches on simplified costs and also about flat rates, about conditions for expenditure. So these are now common rules, the same for all the funds. This includes something like the VAT, value added tax, yes. The VAT, we have always had difficulties with different rules between the funds in this area, and now we go, let's say, with the same rule for all the financing policies. We have also exactly the same rules for financial instruments. If member states want to set up guarantee funds or credit funds, they find the same rules under all funds. And we have also streamlined monitoring and evaluation insofar as we have the same deliverables at the same moment in time. This is necessary because we have to serve the information requirements of the progress reports linked to the linked to the partnership contracts. And we have also, to a certain extent, improved the situation as and control, although, to be very much honest, I think here we have still the biggest differences between the funds. We have different mechanisms, partially, which have not been harmonized so far as we have done for other areas. Okay, and then of course we have still some fund-specific requirements, which means that the EAFRD fund, if we act on the area, if we have area-related support, we are linked to the first pillar, to cross-compliance and to other requirements. So this is then the fund-specific part. And this is something I have now to work on a bit. Okay, good. Is there something coming out here? Now, this is this week the sequence of the strategic programming for all the funds. I think we know the picture meanwhile. We all start under the EU 2020 strategy, and the common strategic framework takes the thematic objectives, which are developed and directly derived from that strategy, these 11 thematic objectives, and defines key actions for the different funds. So in principle, gives a bit, let's say, guidance and a recipe for member states for their programming process on how to use the funds and to give them a focus on specific areas. After that, the response of the member state to this common strategic framework is the partnership contract. This is a document which describes the strategic path the member state wants to take for the different funds in that period. And it is a document which is drawn up by the member state in parallel with the programs, because it has to reflect the results of the programming and the situation in the programs. It is kind of a mirror, and on the other hand, a kind of summary. And at the same time, it explains how the different policies cooperate and how they work together. So I think this is a very important additional element we have now for all the funds. Document delivered by member states, then assessed by the Commission and finally approved by the Commission. And in parallel, you have then the development of the different programs. On our side, the rural development programs, and for the other policies, their own programs. And to be clear, the partnership contract can take different character. It will be different whether we have, I say that now simply because I think that's by nature. You have differences. It is different whether it is a Spanish partnership contract or whether it is, let's say, an Estonian partnership contract, because if you have one member state, one program, more or less, that's different from having 18 regional programs or 20 regional programs in rural development. And let's say that the partnership contract will then have to reflect, to be a bit the summary of the regional programs and of the regional programming. While, let's say, if you have a member state with one national program, with one national approach, that partnership contract could also more take the role of a strategic document which prescribes the strategy for the different funds, while for the decentralized countries, the partnership contract may more reflect what the regions develop in their programs. Okay, under this takes place the programming, as I've said, the programs, and for rural development, let's say the focus of the program and the starting base for programming are the 6 priorities which have been defined here. One, let's say the horizontal priority on knowledge transfer innovation, and then 5 other linked more to competitiveness, the food chain, to natural resources, climate change, resource efficiency, and the last one, promoting social inclusion and poverty reduction, economic development of rural areas. Now, some people say to me, you are neglecting the rural areas now. You have, out of the 6, you have only one priority, let's say, for the rural areas. You should not think that the fact that there is one compared to 5, that this is, let's say, a downgrading by something. We are a bit more specific for other areas, but I think you find under the 6th priority a lot of different aspects which can be addressed, and we will see that a bit later on if we come to the focus areas which can be addressed under these priorities. Now, the Common Strategic Framework, I've already spoken about. That should come out in the next days. This is where the Commission wants to guide Member States to important areas. And for each of the funds, we have, let's say, a more general part of the Common Strategic Framework, which explains the territorial challenges, key territorial challenges and approaches also which are possible. It describes cross-cutting principles, and it also explains mechanisms for ensuring coherence and consistency with the economic policies of the Union. But then you have a specific part which then works on the 11 thematic objectives and indicates under these 11 thematic objectives for each fund separately the key priorities, which means the focus, where the focus should be. And this is something we will look at in detail now in the following. And I think from that you can well see where the focus of the policy is put for the EAFRD. Now, the partnership contract, as I've said, is the Member States' answer to that. It is a sort of umbrella, also a framework, which summarizes the different funds and for the different policies, the allocation of resources, the strategy, where the money should be spent, and how these resources should address the headline targets of EU 2020. What should it achieve, the money, and where is it used for? Now, the partnership contract is an important instrument for us in particular, as it will describe on how Member States organize the different funds with each other. So I think the conclusion which you should draw out of the partnership contract requirement is that the funds are no longer alone on an island doing their policy in an area, but they will have to talk to the other funds. And I think it is very much important that this starts at an early moment in time. And I've understood some of the colleagues from different member states that they have already started contacts, and we, Commission side, partially we are also already invited to meetings of the funds together where we discuss the requirements of how to ensure working together and better organizing the policy. And I think if we are in this context, it will also be more a requirement to ensure that the policies are complementary. So we should no longer simply focus on mechanisms to have a demarcation. So let's say one fund is right, the other fund is the left side, and no jump over the border. We should more think about how can we better use the funds in a complementary way, so that, we have a meaningful, a better, more efficient and meaningful use of these resources, and we can achieve better results on the ground for the people living in Europe. Now, this looks a bit complicated, but I think afterwards you will have some time to look on paper. But it shows that how the EU 2020 headline targets do correspond, or in how far we give an answer to these targets, or we address these targets by the priorities for rural development. Now, you see that you do not always have a one-to-one correspondence. We have that for the priorities, rural development priorities 1 to 3. That's, let's say, a unilateral relationship to the thematic objectives. But the other union priorities serve 2, or sometimes in case of 5 and 6, they serve 3 different thematic objectives. And this has to do with the fact that we think that our policy is the most logically organized according to these 6 priorities, because they work on specific or in specific areas, and that they deliver the results which we expect to get from the policy, and however are in a logical way linked to the thematic objectives, which will then allow also to provide the input into what is required under the partnership contract. Now, if we go a bit more into now the common strategic framework and what is provided for in the common strategic framework in kind of, let's say, in the sense of guidance for member states, or which key actions are important for our policy. And I think these key actions, you should understand them, or at least I understand them a bit, as actions which explain, or which are very much specific for a focus area under our priorities. And these key actions, they are not really strongly, let's say, linked to a specific measure, but they go a bit more into an operational activity. But in principle, of course, they are close to specific measures, and they will be translated in the program by measures, but they go a bit beyond the measure part and show quite practically how the EAFRD wants to act on the different thematic objectives. Now, thematic objective 1 is on strengthening research, technological development and innovation. You see that there is an EU 2020 headline target for this, and with concrete figures in it. So the member states have subscribed to that, to increasing public and private investment levels. And we think that under the EAFRD we have 2 focus areas which address this point. They are both under the first priority, and one is fostering innovation and the knowledge base in rural areas, and we want to achieve this through a better cooperation between agriculture, forestry and food sectors and other actors, and the creation of clusters and networks. We also put a lot of emphasis on advisory services. We think that this is very much important to achieve progress and to deliver innovation under rural development. And the second point is linked to strengthening the links between agriculture, forestry on one side, and research and innovation as cross-cutting objectives for the coming period. The context is, of course, the European Innovation Partnership, which has been explained, or which has been clearly set out in a community communication which was published the end of February. Now, the second thematic objective is on access and use and quality of information and communication technologies. Also here there is a headline target as regards the digital agenda for Europe. And the possibilities to act are addressed by a focus area under our 6th priority. And this focus area is on enhancing the accessibility, use and quality of ICT in rural areas, accessible to all. And then there are a number of examples given, the key actions on how you can achieve that. and one is creation, improvement and expansion of broadband infrastructure. We are also talking about ICT applications and services in support of sustainability and competitiveness. So this means to enterprises, but also maybe to other infrastructure activities, promotion of digital competence outside formal education systems. So this kind of key actions could be addressed under this thematic objective. Now, the thematic objective 3 is something which addresses specifically the agricultural sector. The idea is to increase the size of agricultural holdings, to improve the situation of younger farmers in Europe. We have a very old farming population in Europe, and we think that we should do more efforts to improve that situation. Point in principle 4, focus areas on restructuring of farms, generational renewal, but also focus areas from the third priority, which is on integrating primary producers into the food chain, and also the farm risk management could be addressed here. And in all this, the use of financial instruments, of course, could be helpful, and some of the member states already apply this technique in order to ensure better access to capital for productive investments. Now, the thematic objective 4 leads us to the idea that we should shift towards a low carbon economy in all sectors, and we think that we are also obliged to contribute to this headline target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 20%, increasing renewable energy, and moving towards more energy efficiency. We would do that by four focus areas, which you find indicated here. So this is about energy efficiency. We think about building, investments in buildings and facilities, and also advice for energy efficiency. We also would like to focus on facilitating the supply and use of renewable sources of energy, promotion of bioenergy or bioeconomy, and then also we would like to reduce oxide and methane emissions, and we can also provide support for enhancing carbon sequestration and reduce the emissions from agriculture. The 5th thematic objective is climate change related and linked also to the risk prevention. Here the reference is a white paper, Adapting to Climate Change Towards a European Framework for Action. So you see that all the, let's say, the targets, that all the thematic objectives are underpinned by clearly specified targets in the European context to which the member states have subscribed. So there is a requirement to act towards these targets, and the points here should illustrate how the different funds can act on these targets. So for the EFRD, here it's the possibility to support sustainable water management and to increase water efficiency. Then we also think we have to act on soil management, because an important percentage of the European soils are in a situation of degradation. And we also would like to ensure that the genetic diversity is maintained by appropriate measures. The 6th thematic, not theoretical, but thematic objective, shouldn't stay theoretic, should be operational, is on protecting the environment and promoting resource efficiency. So here we are under a flagship initiative, Resource Efficient Europe, to mention the Water Framework Directive and other legal bases to be used here, and of course the biodiversity strategy. And with the EAFRD, we think we should focus on a very strong focus area which we have under the fourth priority of our policy, and this is restoring, preserving and enhancing biodiversity. We think with agri-environment and with what we do under Natura, we can well deliver in this area, and at the same time we can improve water and soil quality also by appropriate measures, which we have, area-related measures which we have. And of course we can also improve the water efficiency by adopting equipment or whatever you want. Thematic Objective 8 is on promoting employment and supporting labor mobility. The idea is to increase the employment rate for women and for men, of course, and also to ensure that young people get a place in the working world and are not excluded. And this is also, of course, about job creation, in particular in rural areas. And from the EAFRD, we come in with what we have under the sixth priority, and this is the focus on facilitating diversification from the agricultural sector, one part, and then creating new small enterprises and supporting other forms of job creation in rural areas, what we do also nowadays, but we would like also to put focus on that, and we do this also by ensuring that there is support for business startup and also in particular for non-agricultural micro and small enterprises. You know, we have extended the scope here a bit. Thematic Objective 9, promoting social inclusion and combating poverty. Also here there is a clear target to reduce poverty by aiming to lift at least 20 million people out of the risk of poverty and exclusion. This is also important in rural areas, we know that. And here we think we have as a possibility, or let's say as a weapon, to do something against this difficulty and this deficiency with LEADER and with local development strategies in general, which now can, of course, open up also to include projects from other funds. But I think my colleague Pedro Brosai will go more in detail with this a bit later on. Then small-scale infrastructure is important, but you know that local, we want that local businesses, local services are supported here in this area, and that by all this we do something for the quality in life, and also let's say that we keep rural settlements attractive for people who want to stay in these areas. So the last point in this rush through the Common Strategic Framework is the Thematic Objective 10. It is on education, skills and long life learning. Also there objectives to reduce school dropouts and also to bring young people to a good education state. And from the EAFRD, we can contribute by a focus area which is about fostering lifelong learning and vocational training in agriculture and the forestry sector. And we would like to draw member states' focus on this point. Now, what you have seen now is, I think, a broad range of interesting areas and key actions to focus on in the programs. And also I hope that I think we have a clear introduction or clear entry into how we come via this the sequence of programming to the point where we are, let's say, with the programs, because this will then follow later on. But this is a bit, let's say, the philosophy from which we draw of what we should put in the programs. And as I've said, what is very much important is that we do programming on the basis of priorities. The 6 priorities are the center of the programming process. This is not about, path dependence, putting one measure after the other, but we really have to think about what would we like to achieve with the policy, and this goes via thinking about the priorities and also via defining clear indicators and results which we would like to achieve for these areas. Thank you very much for your attention.